Okay. Next thing, general discussion on conflicts of interest and disclosure requirements. That came up as a result of things in the wire, on the blog, getting stopped on the street, people asking me what's going on with the thing with the rowing association and now with the letter that went out. I wanted to discuss what exactly is considered a conflict of interest, what our disclosure requirements are, who decides, and where we go from here. So, Don, you may want to take the lead on that.
I'll just give a general overview, because I know that's
Okay.
where you guys are coming from. And then I don't know if you guys want to get into specific issues, but then you can. And I did actually see the post that Rick had on his blog, and one of the things that Rick had posted was the Code of Ethics. There's a Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation
Right,
Code of Ethics, and that is properly the document to be looking at. That codifies Public Officers Law Section 74 and Article 18 of the General Municipal Law, which are the laws that we have to look to when we're looking at the conflict of interest and disclosure issues. What we've done here at RIOC is basically adopt the Public Officers Law 74, and that's what's set forth in our Code of Ethics. The other ways you can get guidance on this, because bottom line about conflicts of interest and disclosure requirements are that it comes down to a case-by-case examination. I mean, there are certain standards set forth in the Code of Ethics, and if they clearly fall within those, then it's a problem. As you get to closer calls, you got to look at the facts of each situation and make a determination. As we go through, one of the other things we can look to for some guidance are opinions of the Attorney General, and another question I think you just asked is who ultimately makes that call. One thing that can be done on a going forward basis, if for instance, and this is a complete for instance, I think Sally was pretty, at least from what I saw, said it's not going to be done, but if for instance, in the child's school, in connection with the child's school, Sal wanted to solicit from residents of Roosevelt Island, which I understand you don't want to do, but just saying if for instance, going forward, and any other issue, I'm just using that because it's one, what should be done is the board member who's looking to engage in any activity where there may be a conflict of interest or the hint of impropriety or somebody may think there's an issue, is that proactively you write to the Joint Commission on Public Ethics for an advisory opinion.
Well, I actually called the ABO and asked them for some guidance, because I looked in the governance statutes and they said the ABO can give us it, and in fact I made a copy of what they told me to look up, and I highlighted the, oops, 3 on page 2.
So you get the disclosure requirement. You go ahead.
Yeah, the disclosure part.
Right.
Did you want to?
Well, we're going to get the disclosure. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I mean, I look at them as the same, and they're probably not.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it says the ABO recognizes it's not uncommon for board members to have personal or professional relationships with vendors who may do business with the public authority. In such cases, board members must disclose any relationship prior to the authority considering doing business with the vendor. And the board member should be recused from any board discussion or decision on such a transaction. Board members also should not discuss any qualities of the vendor with the staff of the authorities. In all cases, board but I think that's where
that actually get into
right,
and that gets more into the disclosure requirements as well. That is, but if you want me to continue going, or you want to jump in?
Yes, please do. I'm sorry.
So in terms of the conflict of interest, basically it comes down to an interest really is defined as either a direct or indirect pecuniary, which is kind of a financial or material benefit as a result of some kind of contract the corporation is entering into. If whatever interest the board member has represents a substantial conflict, that's what our Code of Ethics says is a conflict of interest. Now there's 11 different steps the Code of Ethics goes through. I think each of you can read them and look at them for yourself, or I can go over each one now, but I think the best thing to do is if you look at number 8 in the Code of Ethics, if I had to say there's one all-encompassing out of these items, it kind of captures the rest of them. I'll just read it for the record here. It's each director, officer, and employee of the corporation must endeavor to pursue a course of conduct which will not raise suspicion among the public that he or she is likely to engage in acts that are in violation of his or her public trust. So, that gets back to the general idea that you do see if you look at the case law or the advisory opinions, that where a director or officer of the corporation is engaged in an activity that gives the appearance of impropriety or may have people think that not everything is on the up and up, appropriate action should be taken, by that board member, whether it be disclosure requirements, recusal, depending on where you are in the process. Now, you pointed to disclosure issues, and that's disclosing is one issue, recusal is another issue. Recusal obviously does not come up in terms of, real recusal until there's a formal action being taken or there's a vote. And again, there's actual conflicts, impressions that conflicts exist. Recusal, again, when you look through the case law, secondary articles, like I said, it requires a case-by-case examination. And again, a good tool we have is to look to the Joint Ethics Commission for advisory opinions. I could go through a few examples of cases where we find a conflict of interest, but they're all pretty clear-cut because we did look it up a little bit. If you want to talk more specifically now about, issues that have arisen, this may be a good time.
All right.
I mean, if you guys want more of a background, I can give you more of an overview.
No, I want to look at where we are right now, like with the rowing association and the disclosure piece of it, where it says that board members must disclose the relationship prior to us considering it, and board members shouldn't discuss any qualities of the vendor with the staff. Now that that's happened, what do we do? Now we have an RFP out.
Well, I mean, I think we'd have to look for guidance, but if you're asking for my opinion here, what happens now that has happened, I think in this particular circumstance, speaks to it. From what I understand how this all played out, initially an idea was brought to the table. It came to light, however it came to light that Sal had a connection to the rowing association that he was on the board.
Yeah, Rick found it.
Right, and then we subsequently decided to do an RFP, and now we've made an RFP, corrected it, and it's an open process. So,
But
I mean, I think
at the second meeting when we discussed this, we talked, Sal was talking about how he has worked with these people before, that they were very good, and so clearly discussed the qualities of the vendor, where the other people who were there did not have that same opportunity. So I don't know if that sheds a light.
Let me just take that.
Sure.
Excellent. When Vince Paparo wanted to bring his dock here, it was discussed as a pilot. So it wasn't something that he wanted to have complete. He wanted to prove that he could do it. At that meeting, I should have disclosed, but I thought by not getting, because I didn't look at it as a voting situation, but I did not say a word. Vince made his, and questions were asked, I didn't respond to that. Hindsight says, yeah, I should have opened up by introducing him and being a member of his board. Having said that, the RFP now is going out, and whoever puts in the proposal that's approved would go forward with it. Is it good or bad? There are issues that have come up about the possibility of things falling from the bridge, the currents that are there. I mean, whoever puts that RFP out has to be able to do all that testing. But getting back to the main issue, should I have disclosed? Yes, I should have. When Rick sent me the email that evening, I responded immediately. Not only am I on that board, but Vince is on the child school board. We work together because our focus is not to make money, it's to do what's best for kids. So when he approached me and said, what about the island? I said, as long as it's open to the entire island, it's something that would be beneficial. So you have to be prepared to have the staff that's going to be working, 7 days a week. So that was the gist of it. Again, should I have disclosed it? I should have. I didn't, that was my mistake. I thought that by night, I didn't see it as a board meeting. I thought it was just a proposal that he was making, and that's where, so that's why I didn't get involved. Do we make any personal issues? I mean, any personal finances? Absolutely not. It's not something that would bring anything other than the opportunity for our kids to be part of the crew team. And the crew team entices me because if you look at the result, aside from the self-confidence that it gives to people, but the confidence that they're accepted to is amazing. So,
But I don't interrupt you, but I don't really think that's the point. I think the point is, now that this has happened, do we have to disqualify the rowing association because
it's up to you.
But I don't know
No,
if
I
that's
think,
what I'm asking you. Who is it up to?
I don't think there's any bright line rule on this that I'm aware of. I would say that, and I think that's where you're going, right? There's one of three things you can do, or maybe even more than three, but you can either, because Sal did speak about the qualities of that's your big issue.
Right.
He spoke about the qualities of the vendor at the last meeting where we get an RFP. You can, I think there's a few ways you can approach it, and we can look for guidance from the outside, from the, boards and whatnot, the ABO or the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, we can ask. Because we do have some time to do that, and that's something we can undertake to do. I think, the one step, as you say, could be disqualification, simply because Sal spoke, a little bit on the behalf of people knew where he was coming from, that knocks them out of the water. I mean, this is not my decision to make.
Maximize the water that's on there, Don.
I did that on purpose.
Sure you did.
But, and it's, I don't know if you guys want to hear my personal opinion on that. I think that's a little bit heavy-handed because I think people knew, and I don't think he oversold it, and I don't think that's going to, balance anybody and picking them over whatever other RFPs come in. I think, I would trust that the board, if they get in the RFPs, they sit down, they get to talk to the different organizations, they found out which one of the associations was the best one, then they could pick one. I mean, we wouldn't be opening ourselves up to any criticism.
The criticism here, I think, is they came with the idea, we did one of those, the fast RFPs like we did with the East River, and we gave you, 2 weeks to respond? Now, if I were one of the rowing associations, I'd say, wait a second. These other guys came, one of the board members spoke for them, and you only gave us 2 weeks to respond. It doesn't look fair.
Look.
Not when there wasn't a reason to have to do it this year.
But that happens a lot. 3 weeks is normally what we give, unless it's something like a huge project and so forth. You'll have to consider it once they come back.
Right.
And see what the situation is. Thing is, time is of the essence for whoever wants to do it. We don't have the time because it's not going to start in June or July. It's like the season's already half over and so forth. So the RFP is out there. Let's see what we get back in responses. We contacted a list of rowing associations to let them know about the RFP. And we'll see what it is. And then, obviously, Sal will not vote on this issue. That's goes.
Well, would it even come up to board vote?
Well, okay, it's not going to come to
Well,
board.
it may
But
not, it may not,
it may not. We'll see what it
It
is.
came up that the New York Shore Association was picked, just playing it out.
Right.
And we got to that point, he would have to recuse himself, obviously, from the vote, and he recused himself now from any further conversations that I would think what we discussed. I'm not even sure the process of how you guys discussed the RFPs, so I haven't been involved in that yet.
Why would it not come to a board vote?
Well, it's not going to be over $50,000. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right. It would
It's
go.
not gonna be over 50?
No,
50
I
or
don't.
15?
No, 50 for the
Oh,
board.
50 for the RFP, 50 for the board.
So it would be,
I don't know.
it would be like, we would go through a committee and go through the RFPs, management, and, if it's over 50,000, then it would go for a board.
I think,
Well, we can't pick and choose which ones go to the board and which can't.
I think the board should be involved.
Well, they could be involved in the process, of the
Sure.
RFP process,
Yes.
evaluate.
Yeah, no, I think in
Yeah.
that
You could do that.
Because
Very
usually
much
we
should
usually
be.
get it later after after you review them, but I think, personally, I think we should look at all of them, all of the RFPs.
Well, with all due respect, Faye, this is a management responsibility, going through the RFPs. I would think it would be micromanaging if the board would go and review all RFPs. The board is there to oversee, not to do management's, what we're hired to do. If you're gonna do the RFPs, then, we might as well just step aside then, and, that's not the function of the board, that's the way I
I
see
think
it.
this
The
is an
board-
exception to
The
the
function of
rule.
the board is what the board decides.
Well, the board is there to oversee. If the board wants to, that's the function of management. So
I think there are RFPs and there are RFPs. There are RFPs that don't really affect, you guys buy your plows and your equipment and your insurance and all that kind of stuff. But then there are things that affects the whole community, that for PR purposes, we wanna know what's gonna happen, and we wanna get involved in.
Well, those would
This
normally
one,
go
the
to the
West
board for
Promenade and that
approval.
stuff.
If they have
Right.
certain questions
Right.
about an RFP, Glad would give you information, so, but they go through all RFPs.
Well, it's similar to the
It's not-
conversation we had, one of the initial conversations I had when we started about the contracts, right?
Mhm.
Certain contracts are just, you're not gonna get involved in every one. Other ones are, have more effect on the overall line. It's a similar discussion we're having. And I think Steve's coming out in the same place we did on that argument. Something like this, that where you're saying it would affect more of the entire island, it's not just everyday stuff that's being done to run the island. The board can be more involved or have more detailed memos like we did with, the most recent one was the funding for the park. With the funding for the park, we had the detailed memo, you presented it, and everybody was, I thought, pretty happy that we had gotten a lot of information. Remember that,
I don't remember.
you
No,
asked
that's
whether,
your part.
you'd asked whether it was
That's
not the pass-through of funds, whether or not it was.
Oh,
the
the FDR.
And they explained it,
Yes,
but that's something like what we gave a
yes.
very detailed
Okay.
explanation, because that, So it's the same type of deal,
Okay,
right? I think it's the same type of analysis.
okay. I think because of the sensitive nature of this with the disclosure and all that, that we should get an opinion either from the ABO or from somebody that we have in a pocket when we're.
No, we can do that. We can call and ask, and, you know, we call and ask, we put something in writing and say, you know, this is what's happened, and ask them for an opinion, whether or not if we go through, you know, keep the New York Road Association as one of the players, if we open ourselves up to attack. Or if it's a no harm, no foul, now we have an RFP out, everybody else is involved, the board member who, you know, hadn't disclosed the interest up front for whatever reasons, you know, it has now, and, you know, whatever, we'll write it out, and I think that's the best way to deal with it. Because then we have
Okay,
certain,
I would agree.
and I think that would be, you know, I don't want to speak for other people, I think that would be, you know, everybody would be amenable to that, because at the end of the day, you know, nobody wants to be open to attack or criticism.
Right,
None
and
of
this
us
has
do. I
been
don't
so
think-
public.
And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for Dr. Forever.
How responsive would the ABO be?
They are, you know, I don't know what the turnaround is on this stuff, and that is a legitimate concern given the time frame. But, you know, we had a good dialogue with them. When these issues come up, we do call over and they do give us guidance.
Okay.
So we could, you know, ask perhaps to, you know, I don't know, I'm speculating here. I could call tomorrow and say, can you give us a preliminary oral opinion? And then maybe follow up with something in writing. We just want a conclusion, and then we could have something on file in writing. I'm not sure, but I can look in and get back to you.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate.
I think that's a good way to deal with it.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to deal with it.
Okay. All right, that could very well be the last agenda item.
Compliance issue?
Oh, that one. Yes, compliance issues, please. Do we have any?